Report cards that the grown-ups are actually scared of. The latest from Indy in the scouting combine, and one big name draft prospect that might be sliding. We've got all that and more. I'm Jason Fitz, and it is time for Inside Coverage. Welcome to Inside Coverage, part of the Zero Blitz family, where we dive into the how and why on all things NFL. He's Charles Robinson. I'm Jason Fitz. C-Rob, you are in Indianapolis, site of the Combine. And let's start with the most, I traveled for a long time in my life in country music. I'm impressed. When you were doing this from your room, I thought maybe disheveled bed. I thought maybe luggage everywhere. Yeah. You got a stack of pillows behind you. That is well done, my friend.
No, I just spent literally 15 minutes cleaning up the room behind. I don't know what it is about the Combine, but I can wreck a room at the Combine faster than any other thing we cover. Super Bowl week, anything else. I don't know what it is about the Combine, but I'm you get 48 hours in and it looks like Motley Crue's been on a bender for a week in my room. The bed is destroyed. There's stuff everywhere. There's there's clothes all over the place. There's everything in my bags, the computer setup, all this crap. It's really messed up. And yeah, before I went on, I was like, okay, I ripped the entire bed apart to completely remake it, put the pillows where they needed to be. I'm glad everything out of shot is, I literally couldn't pan the camera in any direction and not be mortified at what you'd be looking at.
I'm impressed though. And I'll just confess to you that I'm a day in, day out bed maker. I am. I'm the type of person that
oh my God.
I stack the pillows. I make sure everything's good. There's something peaceful about I come into the bed at night and I make sure that I turn down the one corner of the blanket. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about this.
Dawn does the same thing. We go anywhere we go, every hotel room. I get out of the shower and I walk back into the room and the bed's made. Everything is tucked away there. I can't find anything. It's all my clothes are now in drawers. I'm where the hell is all my stuff? I need to find clothes to wear today. And then when we check out, she basically does the job of the house cleaning service. She does their job. All the trash is all bagged up. It's in the corner, it's out of the trash cans and bagged up in the corner by the door. I'm they basically need to come in, vacuum, and then replace the sheets, and we're good. And
that's amazing.
I leave a tip. Okay. When I leave, I'm here's $10. I'm sorry, but at least there's a tip for you. And that's my, that's my penance for how I treat a room.
I'll have to I'm the happy medium between the two. I don't actually bag all the trash out and pull it out, but I definitely do tidy up a little bit because, I just want, in case anybody comes in, I don't want them to judge me. You're in Indianapolis, obviously, for the scouting combine. Before we get to the very specifics, and as you listen to this show right now, we've got a lot of very specific things we'll get into, not the least of which are the NFLPA report cards, some of the murmurs that are happening in Indy so far already on some big name players. Got a lot we're going to dive into, but I want to start with just the very sort of surface level here, because there's a lot of conversation about the value of the combine. For you coming into it, do you feel like this combine feels different than other years?
It's diminishing. You can feel it because fewer and fewer people are coming. I think my first combine was in 2001. And it was when we used to be in the old part of the convention center. You could fit the entire reporting contingent that was here in a room that maybe fit 40 to 50 people. That was all of us. And there was always a cheerleading convention going on. It was really weird. You're grabbing guys, trying to talk to them in the corner. And meanwhile, there's 12-year-old cheer teams doing the routines in the hallway. It was bizarro land, but everyone was here. That was the thing. And when you would get outside of the convention center, you knew the entire coaching staffs were going to be here. You knew the entire personnel staffs were going to be here, and they would be here the length of the entire week. And you knew every hotel where, okay, this is where the old heads go from the personnel departments. You go to Shula's, or Shula's doesn't even exist anymore. Or it was just the rotating different bars and scenes that people would be. Now, the first thing I ask when I get here is I send out a barrage of text messages going, are you even here? Are you coming? Are you here? When are you getting here? When are you leaving? And more often than ever before, I'm getting responses from area scouts going I'm not even there. I'm getting responses from general managers who are I'm going to come in, but I'm only going to come in for 3 days and then I'm gone. Les Sneed from the Rams isn't even here. He's not even coming. it feels diminished in some sense that you aren't able to go out and grab all the people like you usually do. It's much more targeted than it used to be. But interestingly enough, and we'll talk about it today, now that the NFLPA is doing these team report cards, this is the second year in a row they've done this, and it's become a very newsy item in the middle of the week that a lot of people talk about. Like it's you hear agents talking about it. You hear like their team guys talking about it. I had somebody who used to work for the Chiefs that was like, like it's the word's starting to get out on, some of the ways that, the operation is run from ownership down, so that's kind of interesting. You see other things kind of filling the cracks, but the league wants to make it a tentpole event. Fewer guys in terms of like the elites, fewer of those guys are working out. And I think that could be a trend that continues. So it's in a way, it's sort of in its, I don't want to say it's a renaissance period, but it's a period of flux right now. I think it's still trying to figure out where it's going.
I'm also trying to wrap my head a little bit around, like, I know COVID feels like it was a decade ago for some people, but like the fact that we went through the COVID season and that gave extra eligibility means you have so many players now that have put more film out than ever.
Sure.
I think that is something this particular year. There's just more guys than ever that can look around and be like, hey, I got a ton of film. You want to check it out? Just check out a ton of film.
Yeah, you got guys, 6-year guys with, you got 5-year guys. You got 4-year guys that in the past might have been, 3-year guys, but that 3 years there would have been a red shirt. So yeah, there's the class itself is a little weird because we're still working out the extra time that players had from the COVID standpoint, or players who entered the portal, kind of rebooted their careers. Like, talk about Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, guys like that, where they end up playing much more full careers because they had to sort of restart where they were beginning from. But eventually we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy where it concerns just the overall amount of film that you ultimately have. But we're in a pocket of time right now where more players than ever are probably easier to digest for some teams just because of the amount of film that's on.
So all eyes are on quarterbacks, even in Indy already, and not just quarterbacks in the draft, but quarterbacks and where they could end up. I love honesty. So I kind of love that Raheem Morris came out and essentially said that, hey, if the Falcons had better quarterback play, he wouldn't even have the job right now. Like it's a reminder of how much that one position influenced the entire future of the organization. I thought it was frankly, a refreshing moment from Raheem, but man, you also got to expect that he feels a little bit of heat to get that answered, right? Like he took this job and he's not going to get a ton of chances to get more opportunities to get a quarterback. So what's your sense so far on where the Falcons are leaning with quarterback?
Well, I mean, you can't answer the Falcons without answering the Giants. What are the Giants going to do? They're just bracketed by all these teams. You're looking at Denver at 12. What's Denver going to do? Obviously the top of the draft, you have Chicago, that it feels more and more like they're going to end up drafting Caleb Williams and dealing Justin Fields in the coming days. You obviously have Washington. We expect they're going to address the quarterback spot. You have the Patriots. We expect they're going to address the quarterback spot. So you have I can't tell you what Atlanta's going to do because I can't tell you what all these other teams around them are going to do. I'm still trying to, Denver, Sean Payton comes out and we're elongating this Russell Wilson thing, which is hilarious because inside the building, when you talk to people, they're just like, he's gone. Like he's not going to be here. And when you ask them to put percentages on it, it's like 95.5. And you're like, okay, well, the 5% obviously is that he will be here. The 95 is that he won't be. I was like, I asked somebody specifically, why does that 5 exist? And the response I got was, well, because Sean just hasn't made the decision yet. And so you can't say it's 100% until Sean, pulls the trigger on this thing. And so even from that standpoint, you're like, all right, well, where are the Broncos at? Like, if they're going to get rid of Russell Wilson, where are they at in their quarterback evaluation? Well, they're like, we're just getting into it. Like, we're just getting into the nitty gritty. So it makes it hard to determine, are they a move up team? Are they a stand pat team because they found some guys they think could slide to them? If they do find, let's say, a JJ McCarthy, let's say they like, and I'm not saying they do, but let's say it's a JJ McCarthy or a Bo Nix or whoever. Now they have to start to think about Atlanta. Okay, well, is this how Atlanta's going to address this? Or is Kirk Cousins not going to get this deal done in Minnesota? And is he going to end up down in Atlanta? Because if he does, that feels like a very turn the key situation. Team's already built out. You could probably plot Kirk Cousins in the middle of it, and they're going to be pretty competitive, at least playoff wise, I think pretty quickly in Atlanta. And is that what they're gearing themselves toward? So yeah, I mean, the quarterback questions have not become easier to answer because there's still these guys hanging out. Like, where's Fields going to end up? I had a long conversation with someone today about like Pittsburgh and how do they feel about their quarterback situation, and why do you hear so much buzz about Russell Wilson connected to Pittsburgh? Why do you hear so much buzz about Justin Fields potentially connected to Pittsburgh? What would that mean for Mitch Trubisky, right? Like if you're going to, or I'm sorry, not Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett. If you're going to bring in one of these guys, you should just deal Pickett now while he might still have some value on the market, right? You don't want to get into a situation where it's like the Jets. There might have been an earlier window to actually deal Zach Wilson and get something out of him. They just waited too long. San Francisco, there might have been an earlier window to deal Trey Lance, and they waited a season too long. So it's a story when you came in, you were like, this is going to be a very quarterback dominated conversation at the combine. We're a few days into it, and it's like everybody, I think, is still questioning what it's all going to ultimately look like.
How much in your mind of the presumed trade interest in Justin Fields is just about the fact that there are more teams needing a quarterback than quarterbacks available? You know what I mean?
Okay, so I will ask you this. Is that true, though? Like, is there – I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I'll give you an example. Someone said to me, like, hey, Sam Darnold might end up being like a viable bridge guy somewhere. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. They're like, but okay, just he's in, was in Kyle's system. He's seen some different systems. He's got a lot of starting experience. And maybe there's a team out there that gets cornered and goes, all right, let's try to see if we can maybe figure this out with Darnold or Garoppolo or whatever. I think we're brushing aside some options as not really tenable options that might be. Darnold really might end up being like a 1-year answer for a team that gets stuck. Garoppolo could be a 1-year answer for a team that gets stuck. Russ could be a 2-3 year answer for a team that feels like it got shut out. And I think some of that is predicated on what does this second tier of quarterbacks do in the workouts? Like JJ McCarthy might flop. He might do great in interviews. He goes out and throws horribly, or, there's just issues with him that teams don't necessarily like in terms of the lack of film. Nix feels like he has a fit, and it may be a narrow fit in terms of what NFL team or coach he could pair with. Penix, that national championship game certainly did not help him. I think there's a lot more question about him and some of the accuracy, especially short to intermediate, and especially how he reacted to pressure against Michigan, where people are like, that's how the NFL is going to be. You can get hit a lot. Like, maybe you're not going to get drilled and you're not going to get hurt necessarily, but there's going to be a lot of frantic stuff going on around you. So I think that second tier, and we'll get to the first tier too, because we're going to talk about a guy in the first tier, has not really sorted itself out in a way where teams tangibly think, oh yeah, what we thought is actually going to materialize. There's going to be 5 first-round quarterbacks who can actually fill needs. And then, we'll have some free agents out there that will fill needs as well. And everybody's going to have a hole plugged.
I feel like, the only real answer that I can give anybody whenever I'm asked, is JJ McCarthy going to be the answer? I'm like, who the hell knows? Like, I just don't know how we're even supposed to, like, he wasn't asked to carry Michigan in any way that I think we have tangible proof of who he is. So like, I'm genuinely curious to see what it looks like at the combine, but also I who the hell knows? Like it's the ultimate roll of the dice for him.
I had a conversation today with an evaluator, and he was like, the really interesting thing about this is, we're so focused on Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels. He's like, I bet you, he's like, I guarantee you, Nix or McCarthy or Penix or someone that is not really considered like a day 1, day 2 guy, maybe Spencer Rattler, who knows? Like I'm not saying it will be Rattler, but someone else in this mix is going to end up being a pretty good quarterback. And maybe the rest of them are just going to be backups or, guys who won't last in the league long at all. How do we figure out who that is? If we can't get in that top 3 mix and we some teams don't even feel like it's a top 3. Who is it in that second wave that's going to turn out to be the truly quality player who might trickle down the board a little bit. Teams just don't have answers right now.
You just said some people don't even think it's a top 3. And I'm shooketh. I am shaken to my core because it wasn't that long ago. I was talking to Nate Tice on one of our shows, and he was saying, man, I got Drake Maye as number 1. And a couple months ago, I heard plenty of people saying I got Drake Maye as number 1. And now I feel like the conversation's only Caleb and Jaden. I'm not even hearing Drake Maye's name bounced around as much. Like, what's going on with Drake Maye right now?
So one of the first meetings I had when I was here, I met with a personnel guy that has been on like very big Drake Maye supporter, like really believed in his talent for 2 years. Like I can remember literally after Maye's first year where he really, played well for North Carolina, and it was really even in the midst of that first season where he really was flourishing. Him saying like, this is the guy, like, this is the guy, like he's going to be the number 1 pick whenever he comes out, yada, yada, yada. So I met with him and I said, I'm hearing there's just like a lot of negging of him right now. Like there's a lot of, some people are questioning whether his deep accuracy is really that good at all. Some people are talking about, does he know how to throw with the proper velocity, with shorter and intermediate throws? Is he really that good of an athlete? Like just all kinds of stuff. I'm like, what is going on here? And so we met and I asked him, I said, are you hearing this? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, is this real or is this bull? Like, is this CJ Stroud again? Are we doing this is this going to be a CJ Stroud thing? And he said, look, if you ask me, he's like, I'd take him. I take him 1. And he's like, and I feel like I would not be surprised at all if we go through all this crap and then come April, the 2nd pick in the draft is Drake Maye. But he said he is hearing it. And their team is certainly a team that I think is on the periphery of potentially taking a quarterback, in the first round. And he said, we'd be real happy if he slid to us. Like, I think that's the guy that we would ultimately take. And, but he said he's heard it and he's heard, he's had debates with like other personnel people and he's heard the negatives that are being rolled out. And it's funny because after I had that lunch, I literally got into my car and I called Nate Tice and I was like, hey, let me know if you're hearing it because I'm starting to hear this here. And I just had a lunch with a guy who's been his biggest backer forever, who said he's going to be a top 2 pick. He's been telling me this going on a year. And now he's saying, I don't know, like he might actually slide a little bit. And I am hearing this negative stuff. And I asked Nate, like, what do you think of this? And he said the same thing. He's like, I don't get it. It's like, I just don't get it. He says, he told me, he said, when I ask guys, is he a hard worker? Yeah. Like it's like he has all these A's across the board. And then he's like, and then yet somehow there's this, you feel like the teams are fading him a little bit. So I don't know to me, I'm like, is that real or not? We're going to have to wait and see.
This is what I know. If somehow somebody in the top 3 decides not to take one of these quarterbacks, it's going to get real interesting to see what 4, 5, and 6 start doing because the King's ransom is only going to get wilder. Now, a lot of the presumption 4, 5, and 6. If anybody's reading mock drafts right now, you see the wide receivers going, and I feel like having covered the draft for 6 years in my career, every year I feel like I'm in there in the seat saying, "Oh, it's the best wide receiver." This seriously is when you talk about day one guys that are going to just come in like Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze would in any other draft, clear cut, be the number 1 wide receiver. But this is Marvin Harrison Jr.'s draft, right? Like I would think, but he's not doing anything with the combine. He's not really, I mean, according to some reports, he's not going to do anything leading up, right? So in your mind, is there some chance that Neighbors or Odunze finds a way to catch Marvin Harrison based solely on what they're going to do that he won't?
I think it was interesting because coming into the draft before we knew Neighbors wasn't going to work out, like I think the presumption was that Marvin wasn't, like people had known for a while. Now, I think people thought, all right, we'll go and do the pro day. Now it sounds like you might not even do a pro day. You might do nothing. You might just say, look at my film, straight up, look at my film. You know my work. That's enough. I'll come for a personal day and I'll go through the paces on the board, or, we'll run through the offense. You can get to know me from a character standpoint, but I'm not doing any of the physical stuff at all. But Neighbors, I think it was like that guy could light it up. Like, let's say in the 40 and the agility drills, like he could just look and I think there are some teams that look at it as sort of like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1A. And then they can make an argument about like, okay, like how much do you value speed? How much do you value, because like Marvin Harrison Jr. could run a 4.5. Like he could have come here and run a 4.5. And then if Neighbors comes in, let's say it would have happened. Marvin Harrison comes in and runs a 4.5. He's still a great player, right? And that 4.5 with pads on and watching it on film doesn't look like a 4.5. It looks faster than that, right? But then say Neighbors comes in here and would have run a 4.3, which I heard was possible, that he could run a 4.3 flat and then kill it in the agility drills. And then you're sitting there going, well, geez, he runs really fast without pads. And then when we put the film on, he runs really fast with the pads on and he does all the agility drills. Maybe we should rethink whether this hammerlock Marvin Harrison Jr.'s wide receiver one that we've had for basically a couple of years running now, maybe we should rethink that. That could still, I think, play out potentially, but it won't play out in front of us. It's going to have to play out with, what work does Neighbors do? Does he do pro day stuff? Does he, he's not going anywhere and working out. Like I was just flat out told straight up by like a personnel guy. We had a debate about the wide receivers working out. He's like, you don't bring those guys in and work them out. It's like, you don't have wide receivers running at your facility. He's like, that's crazy. Especially top 5 guys. It's like, no way. Because something could happen. He's like, he could tear a knee. They could tear a hamstring. He's like, no. He's like, you don't bring those guys in. He said, if they run at the combine, they do the drills at the combine, or they do it at the pro day. He said, you don't bring them in to do all kinds of physical stuff because they're just tuned up and, it could be a disaster. So I do think there's a chance for Neighbors to behind the scenes make that a tougher call on a team in the top 5. Odunze, obviously he's going to do work here. So like JJ McCarthy's going to do work here. Rome Odunze's going to do work here. And we're like, okay, it's the showcase event. Let's see if they go out and they blow it up in the showcase event. And then it becomes an even more interesting conversation amongst, the top of the second tier of the quarterback class or the first tier of the wide receiver class. But like you said, this is we do say this about wide receiver classes. It feels like the last few years, every year. The difference is we went through a wide receiver class last year where it was like smaller guys, 5'10", 5'11", good route runners, fast, maybe not super big. This is straight up X's. This is like dogs. This is like size, speed, like build an X receiver in a laboratory. There's like 4 or 5 guys where you could be like, yeah, these guys all fit that. And then if they come out, now some are more raw than others, some might be faster than others, whatever. But there's a lot of those like prototypical from a physical standpoint, X guys. And that's why I think you're still going to end up seeing 5 wide receivers, maybe 6 could squeak in by the end of the first round.
Yeah, it feels like it has a chance to be a historic wide receiver draft. But here's the thing. I understand why Marvin Harrison Jr. is doing nothing. He has nothing to gain. I get that. I'm a little surprised that Malik Neighbors isn't looking at some of this as opportunity, right? Like, hey, he's not doing anything. I get at least, maybe I could wiggle my way up. Like maybe the perception is it's only down for him too. But I mean, clearly this is Marvin Harrison Jr. has been primed to be the top wide receiver off the board for 2 years.
Yeah. But see, the interesting thing in play here is that Neighbors has also been so good for LSU. It's not like he just came on all of a sudden out of nowhere. Like he's been a known commodity for a while now. He was expected to be the next assembly line guy out of there. We don't know literally already what like Neighbors camp is hearing from NFL teams. I mean, they could already have a team in the top 5 going, we already like you. Like we feel great about you. We've done all our work. We've done all our, on-campus stuff. We've been watching you for a long time. Maybe we've had LSU players on our roster. We've already done some character work by talking to our own guys about you. So we're already feeling really good about it. Don't go out there and do something that could potentially change your career by suffering, blowing out an ACL and an agility drill or tearing a hamstring trying to, get under 4.3 in the 40, something like that. So there's probably some background stuff that maybe we're not necessarily privy to right now.
As you say that too, I find myself thinking about the fact that, like, look, I've just presumed all this time the quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, and that means Arizona is going to be sitting in this prime spot to take whichever wide receiver they want. I presume it's Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of presumption there. What I know, and look, I don't really make anything of the Kyler Murray, our quarterback, whatever. They're going to tweet out what they tweet out. I don't care about that. I do wonder if this conversation gets more interesting if somehow one of those top 3 picks shocks the world and they go with one of these wide receivers. Like if New England sits there and says, yeah, we're not a quarterback away, we don't love any of these guys, we're taking a wide receiver. Now all of a sudden Arizona's sitting there looking at wide receiver or one of those 3 quarterbacks. It could get spicy. Maybe this is just me wanting to create Bravo level reality TV drama, but at least now I'm letting myself walk into a world where the Cardinals have to make a tough decision.
Yeah, I will say though, there's depth too at the wide receiver position. So, I think you're going to have teams that are certainly not going to, I'd be shocked if we moved up for a wide receiver because there's enough depth in the first round that you should have a couple of options that you kind of like, or that you have a first round grade on. Then the second round, there's still some size guys. There's still some, you have like a Deebo Samuel type. You have you can, there's still guys you can get depth wise. And I guess the one argument I would make where you could see top 5 is so rich for a wide receiver at this point, but the receiver's rich now. Like it's like, if like go and get an elite receiver now in free agency, like T Higgins is $22 million now as a $22 million wide receiver. Justin Jefferson's going to reset the wide receiver. He's going to basically have the richest offensive non-quarterback contract in the NFL when he does his deal. Jamar Chase. I mean, it's an extremely rich position now. So I could see teams where if they're sitting there going, hey, we think this is a Justin Jefferson level talent, but we can't go get Justin Jefferson. That's way too expensive. Let's draft the guy and just keep him for 5 years and maybe try to use a tag or 2 and squeeze 6 years out of his career and not pay, 25, 27, $30 million a year, which is what the top level receiver. If you thought a guy was Justin Jefferson in this draft and you're like, he's going to have that kind of an instant impact, even if you're like, we only get to keep him for 6 years, that's still 6 years. You're not paying $30 million a year for that talent. And Jefferson was probably worth $30 million a year after his rookie season.
Yeah. And I mean, 6 years is a lifetime in the NFL, especially for front offices and coaches, right? Like, no doubt. Before we get to the report cards, which I know everybody's eager about, there was some other news, not just about draft prospects, but about actual players currently in the league. The Chiefs did a couple of things. They released MVS. I don't think that's necessarily shocking. More important here, they franchise tagged L'Jarius Sneed. Also, maybe not shocking, but definitely asserts that they're going that way, and now creates an interesting conversation about what's going to happen with Chris Jones. So what was your reaction to the L'Jarius portion of this?
I still think he could be traded. I still think there's a chance he could ultimately be dealt, that it could be a tag and trade situation. But now the clock is basically running because you've slotted yourself in a position here where you're like, okay, free agency, the bell's coming, in a couple of weeks in March. And Chris Jones is going to be gone day one. Like he's going to be already in that non-tampering or the legal tampering period. He'll have his deal worked out, within hours. And so you really have a couple weeks here to grind out a trade if there's a trade ultimately to be had. I would not be shocked ultimately though if the tag is to basically keep an extremely valuable player and a young player versus squeezing a few more years ultimately out of Chris Jones. So I don't think a trade is completely out of hand at this point for the Chiefs and Sneed. I still think there's a possibility that could happen.
So what happens with Chris Jones at this point? Because obviously he's going to command monster money, and rightfully so. Right. He should. The teams that can give him monster money, when you look at the teams that have a ton of cap space, most of them suck, right? So like, it's just kind of an interesting, like, if you're Chris Jones, you're coming off of Super Bowls and Patrick Mahomes. You want your payday. You deserve your payday. Are you willing to go to a team that sucks to get it? This feels a little, I know money talks, but this feels like a difficult situation.
He's won some rings. He's not sitting there going, geez, I got to go out and get that Super Bowl ring. I don't know him personally, so I can't say what his motivation is. Obviously, he said he wants to run it back, in Kansas City. Now, parade day, I always feel like guys, right? You're coming right off whether it's on parade day or right after the Super Bowl, you're always feeling like you want to run it back. And then after a couple of days, your agent's like, let's really talk about this. Like, let's look at the financial realities, because you got a couple rings on those fingers. Now you have an opportunity to get a contract that takes care of you, your family, and probably your kids' kids for the rest of their lives if we invest this correctly. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule out that he goes to a team that maybe might surprise us a little bit, and it's a paid mercenary contract, but also, you have to ask yourself, like, what bad team out there is like, yeah, let's sign up for 30 million plus, per year and a boatload of guaranteed money, who knows, 80, 90, $100 million in guaranteed money, to bring Chris Jones in. I wonder if maybe there's teams that we look at where we're like, okay, cap wise, maybe they only have $30 million under the cap. And that's another thing too. Remember this jump, that unexpected jump in the salary cap that we didn't know was coming, an extra $13 million a year, created some creativity for some teams out there that maybe before might not have been in the Chris Jones market, that now are like, we can just move a little bit of money around. Maybe he's viable, and maybe a contending team could potentially take a shot on him. That's a little more unexpected. Hell, we heard the Bills. It was interesting to hear the Bills just straight up come out and say, yeah, like that bump in the salary cap really kind of saved us. It really helped us, significantly. They're not alone. There's a number of teams. And, I think even the Chiefs are sitting there going, that helps us, having another $13 million we didn't expect gives us a little more flexibility. So,
so you're telling me Chris Jones ends up signed by the Raiders to line up next to Max Crosby to try and take down the Kansas City Chiefs. I love it. Perfect, C-Rob. That's how we're just gonna
he would look great in that uniform, though. It would kill Chiefs fans, but he would look great in that uniform.
I mean, then he can get the ultimate revenge for not getting the contract he wants. I've worked all of this out in my head. This is the problem. I'm not sure how many actual wins it suddenly gives the Raiders. And, there's this great debate in many circles about, wins above replacement. Chris Jones is an absolutely spectacular player. Is he the sort of player that takes you from 8-9 to 13-4 all of a sudden by adding him? I don't know about that, but let a man dream. I can dream for right now. Real quick before we get to the report cards too, Zach Wilson can seek a trade. I can also try and date a supermodel. I'm not sure the two aren't unrelated. Zach Wilson can seek a trade. What the hell is somebody gonna like? I wouldn't even give up the M&Ms like peanut. I don't like peanut M&Ms. Peanut butter M&Ms are delightful. Peanut M&Ms are trash. I don't even see a team giving peanut M&Ms at this point for Zach Wilson.
Initially, I would have said I didn't either. I think it won't. I can't see it being like a 4th round pick that the Niners got out of Trey Lance, right? But it's funny. I talked to somebody today, and I actually kind of made the joke about what it's like to for Zach Wilson's agent to shop him at this stage, and like this guy he straight up said to me, he's like, look, a lot of people liked him. Like a lot of people liked the talent. A lot of people. There were, things like even in the very small windows of him playing well for the Jets, he showed things that you were like, all right, I kind of get it. It was just that all the downside was so bad and it was so much more prevalent. I could see them getting a 7th out of him. I could see them getting, maybe if somebody's really desperate out there, a 6th, maybe. I mean, I'm my guess it'd be like a 7th. Like just some teams like, we'll throw you a 7. We'll get, we'll take a look at the kid. He needs a fresh start or whatever. Maybe we'll look at the Jets situation. Go, look, that line was so bad. We'll talk ourselves into, and look, I'll be real with you. Like, I wouldn't bother me. Any team giving up a 7th, even a 6th. I mean, like what most 6th and 7ths, those guys don't make the roster. They only make the roster if they're special teams capable. And even if they do, they might be gone a year later. Or they, bop up and down from the practice squad to the roster. Take a flyer, see if the kid can be reprogrammed and you can maybe get something out of him. I would not bring him in as a backup. I can tell you that. He would definitely be my third quarterback. I would definitely have to be a team going, we're going to keep 3, and he will basically be a guy we'll bring in on a developmental. And if we like him, we'll potentially talk about extending, a very cheap, veteran extension for a year or two to continue to develop them in our system.
That you're actually right. When you put it smart like that, see, Rob, I can't even argue with you. You're right. Like, it's better than just a flyer on the 7th rounder.
I mean, Fitz, who are you going to find? And let's be honest about it, okay? And let's be fair. He's not talentless. He's just not. He has athletic ability. He has a great arm. You're not going to find guys in the 6th and 7th like that. We can go through the paces. When the draft rolls around, you and I will sit and we'll text. I'll be like, all right, here we are. We're in the 6th round. Let's see what quarterbacks come off, and let's compare them to the ability of that guy versus the ability of Zach Wilson. I mean, in a way, if you're trading for him, you're wagering on two things. Number one, you're wagering that all that talent that you liked is still there. It hasn't just vanished. And number two, you're wagering that the Jets are just a bunch of screw ups, that they haven't been able to get what they need out of him. And, and I have people that, work for the Jets that I think very highly of, but I could also understand if other franchises are sitting there going, let's just wager they don't know what they're doing and maybe go get this guy. And he's got some ability that we can use.
Some dumbass is going to tweet both of us now about, well, Brady was in the 6th and Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. I just want to say to you, don't press send. Just don't press send. The dumbass don't press send.
But I mean, you're not wrong about Purdy. That was very recent.
Yeah, for every Purdy. Like, that's just the number of fans now. They're going to look around and be like, yeah, well, Brock Purdy. It's like, okay, that's fine. All right. We've teased it. We've told you it's coming. It's coming up next. There was one absolute shocking grade in this year's NFLPA grades for different teams. You won't believe it. We'll talk about it next. The NFLPA has released their report cards for the second consecutive year. For anyone that doesn't know, they go out and they survey current players in the league. An important note here, the number of participating athletes in the survey was way up this year. So obviously players felt like it had some importance because 1,706 players responded this year, which was an increase of about 400 players overall. It's a big number, C-Rob. So before we even get into the grades, obviously the players are telling us by participating at an even higher level that this is important.
Yeah, 17% jump from last year was the first year they did it to this year. And I asked JC Treader, the NFLPA president, I said, like, did you do anything different? And he was like, no. It's like, we didn't push it. It was like the same rollout, same exact rollout as it was last year. We just had more guys who wanted to take part in it. And they attribute that to players looking around their own teams who might not have participated last year and going, saw some improvements. Saw some things that change. Like, you're in the Arizona Cardinals. You're like, oh, they don't charge us for dinner anymore. Like, that's a good thing. Like, maybe I should, take part in this poll the next time it rolls around. So yeah, as you said, big jump, 17% jump, and 1,706 players is a really high number. That's 77% of the membership. I could see them getting this into the 80s and 90%. And it was interesting too. One thing they added this year that I think shows a bit of being an honest broker. They said to the players, grade us, grade the NFLPA, tell us what we're screwing up on. And Lloyd Howell, the executive director, was like, be honest with you, wasn't super happy with the grade. He's like, but we got to be honest here. And if we're going to put the mirror in front of teams, we should put the mirror in front of ourselves and ask the players, what are we doing that needs improvement? And I'm like, you know what, that's like good for you. I'm glad that you're actually looking at yourselves and not just the teams.
I respect the hell out of it. And, through this process, anybody can go out and look. Yahoo we put out a bunch of the grades out there. It's also out there on Twitter X. The NFLPA account has put the full rankings. You can click on the link and it gives you everything you need to know about your team. It's interesting because the big grade that stood out was a negative one. The Chiefs ranked 31st overall, which is stunning because they ranked first with their head coach, obviously, but had a D+ or worse in 7 categories, including having Clark Hunt ranked as the worst owner. C-Rob, like, I get that you're winning games, so maybe it doesn't matter, but that has to be a gut punch to the Hunt family, to the Chiefs organization, to see that sort of perception. That has to hurt.
Well, what's interesting too was last year the composite ranking, they were 29th in basically workplace culture. That's what this is about. It's not about wins and losses on the field. It's about what is it like to be a player inside this organization as it pertains to your day-to-day life, what you eat, what's available to you in resources, how do they treat your family, what's the travel like. It'd be like, it's an employee survey. It's like you and I being asked what it's like to work for Yahoo in every respect. And so when they ranked 29th last year, we were like, wow, geez, that's a shocker. Like, we expect the Bengals because historically we've known, the negative comments players have made, the Cardinals, the Commanders, the Chargers. Like, we're like, yeah, these are not surprises. Like, this does not shock us at all. But then to see the Chiefs there, so, you kind of thought, well, they must have addressed some of these things. Like, that's going to improve. No, it got worse. They went from 29th in the composite to 31st. And as you said, that's hard to do when Andy Reid got an A+. He was the number before in terms of like the data. He was the number one most highly graded coach by his players in the entire league. And in terms of what was weighted, owner and coach were the two biggest, like most heavily weighted things that you were voting on. So to have a coach score an A+, you had to really tank like everything else to do what the Chiefs ultimately ended up at 31st. And it was because Hunt got that F-. It was because they didn't get any other grade above a C+ other than Andy Reid getting an A+. So across the board, it was either mediocrity or players are like, this is not good. Like, it's just a bad situation, like the training staff and the locker room and all these different things. So Hunt, what was interesting about Hunt, the NFLPA was very specific about it. They're like, look, you have to make sure you contextualize this. He got an F- because we asked all the owners, it was, what do you think the willingness is of the owner to invest in the franchise, like the facilities, like basically, which is from the NFLPA standpoint, that's like the number one thing that they want to see from owners who will spend their money on making the environment comfortable for players or top shelf for players. And I think the way the scoring went, it was like he got a 4.9 out of 10 from all the Chiefs players that voted. And that's ultimately what transformed it into an F- for him. So they were not happy. And JC Tretter, again, he just said, look, from his understanding, it was, they felt like there were promises made in different avenues of the franchise. And one big one was this renovation of the practice facility locker room, which apparently they pretty drastic distaste for. And they, according to Tretter, players said that they had been told following the 2022 season, which resulted in a Super Bowl, they were going to have a new locker room, a renovated locker room coming into the 2023 offseason build up to last season. Then they got there and they're like, wait, nothing's changed. Like, it's the same exact locker room, except we have chairs now instead of stools. Like, that's the only thing that changed. And so, according to Tretter, the response that the franchise gave was, well, you played too deep into the off season, or you played too deep into the postseason. And so we didn't have time to do it. So we just didn't do it, which is, again, if that's true. And, Clark Hunt was asked about that today. He brought up the fact that they had renovated the locker room at Arrowhead, which was, I think, prior to the 2021 season. But he did say, hey, look, the practice facility remains a priority for us. It's coming up on being 2 decades old. What I thought was remarkable about all this is how powerful this tool has gotten already in like just 2 years. We went from last year, holy cow, look at this report card that's kind of taking a lot of these teams to task. Then those teams improved some of those things going into year 2. And then year 2, the report card comes out and you have an owner of the Super Bowl champs on the same day the report card comes out being asked, yo, you got an F-. Like what is going to answer for that? When have we seen this in league history where players were given a tool in which they felt like we can speak without any retaliation from ownership and we can tell what we think is the truth? And it comes from a franchise that's won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and they roasted their owner over the facilities. Like, it's unbelievable. And I think it's a seismic shift that fits. And I think it even fits this week because think about this, Fitz. We we have 5 guys who are not going to work out at the combine, right? That could be potentially even the top 5 picks in the draft, right? 3 quarterbacks, 2 wide receivers, who could conceivably be the top 5 picks in the draft. Nope, not doing any of the combine stuff. Then you have basically all these agents and all these players saying, we're not doing any cognitive stuff. Screw the S2, screw the Wonderlic. We're not doing any of that because it just gets leaked out and it makes us look bad. If you want to do any of that stuff, we can go and sit us down in a private visit, take us through whatever you want to take us through. Take us through the game book, take us through different scenarios, but we're not doing the cognitive stuff anymore. That reality, and then now this report card where you have teams that are basically willing to call out their owner, and it's a Super Bowl winning team. I think it really speaks to the voice that you see developing the last few years with NFL players, where they're starting, as long as they have the proper tool to use the voice, they're willing to use it.
It's interesting because I think the NFL has oftentimes, the players specifically, have oftentimes felt and seemed powerless compared to other player unions. This is a great point by you of a way that they are still capable of using their voice. For anyone that hasn't seen it, the categories: treatment of families, food, nutritionist/dietitian, locker room, training staff, weight room, strength coaches, team travel, head coach, and ownership. So these are all very fair things. And the whole point and purpose is, hey, I remember years ago, I interviewed Calais Campbell after he picked the Jags. And I asked him why. And his answer so flatly was money. I'm like, did you even talk to anybody? He's like, nah, didn't have time. I think part of what this does is it educates the players as they get ready for free agency. Hey, here's what people are telling you in an honest moment about the experience in different places. Now, obviously, facilities haven't equaled wins because some of the places that have some of the highest ranks of facilities aren't nearly as competitive. But if you're an organization, this is egg on your face. Like, I think we have to give the Jags, for example, some credit. As pointed out, they went from 28th last year to 5th this year. So, like, there are some moments where you turn around and say, man, we got to make sure while we're trying to change our culture, that guys come here and they feel some kind of way about being in the building.
And they interestingly, the Jags, so last year the Jags were the big kind of embarrassing low light, was like, oh my God, they got a rat infestation in the practice facility. Everyone was like, oh my God, they got a rat infestation. Like, geez, that's a black eye. Like, that is not a great thing to come out. Well, they move into a new practice facility. As someone joked today, as we were kind of going through the report card, someone was like, hey, new facility, less rats. Like, that's how it kind of goes. But when you looked at the 11 categories, what I thought was interesting was, for the Jaguars, it was all A's and B's in 10 categories. But you could tell there's honesty in the responses because they got a D. It was like a D+, I think, for treatment of family. So basically these players are like, hey, all this stuff's great, but it sucks the way you're treating our family, whatever that, might ultimately go into, how they arrived at that opinion and how it ends up being a D. So it wasn't like it's just all gravy where they're like, oh, everything's great, everything's fine, rose-colored glasses. No, they're like, hey, these 10 categories, great. This 11th one, you suck. You got to do something about it. And that's the message that ultimately, gets sent to ownership. And covering this league for decades, 2 decades plus, I've never seen the NFLPA create a tool or do something that wasn't related to like a CBA negotiation that ultimately I think is going to be this powerful for NFL players. Because even though we can't say it correlates to wins and losses on the field, I do think it correlates to ego, and it does correlate to shame. And I do think these owners, when you're Clark Hunt and you sit there today, you're surrounded by reporters going, did you promise them a new locker room and then didn't follow through? You walk away from that going, I don't want that to happen again. And if you're the Chiefs, you definitely are going, we went from 29th to 31st. Maybe we should start to do something here to get that boosted up because this ain't working.
Well, and I look at treatment of families. I looked at the numbers. 16 of the 32 teams in the NFL got a D+ or worse on treatment of families. 23 out of 32 got a C+ or worse. That's a tangible thing that you can control, right? Like, so as an organization, you look in the mirror and you're like, hell, we got to figure out a solution to that, because if people feel like they're not being treated well, then that's like, and then, the nugget that was interesting, and Stone pointed this out from all of the work on that. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers charging non-starting players with less than 4 years of experience a fee of $1,750 if they wanted to opt out of having a roommate. prior to games in their hotel room. It made me laugh because when I was touring on the road, and I was lucky enough at one point to be, when the band Perry had the fourth biggest song of all time in country music, I still had a road roommate. Like Boone, our drummer, was my road roommate. There was always two of us to a room. I didn't know when I went to work for ESPN at the time and I was booking travel, I went to one of the bosses and I was like, who's my road roommate? And they looked at me like I had lost my damn mind. I had no idea. I was like, wait, we don't have roommates? You get your own room when you travel? Like I had no idea. So like, I think this is funny, but the thought of like $1,750. Oh, what really? What do we do? Tampa Bay, what are you doing with that $1,750 that you're charging and just this small group of players?
And that's it. It's a small, like how many players are we really talking about? 4, guys with less than 4 years in the league that are non-starters, that group, like even if it's 30 players, right? You're talking about, okay, that's 30 times basically $2,000, right? You're talking about like 55 grand, right? Per game, 17 games. Okay. 750 G's, between 750 and $1 million. To us, that's a lot of money. And I get it. Have you seen revenues in the NFL? Do you know why the salary cap exploded this year? Because of the amount of money that's coming in from the TV deals, the ancillary gambling revenues, all these other things that are pouring money into the NFL right now. And every time a franchise gets sold, it's X billions. I mean, it's, what are we to now? I average it out. Every franchise is going to sell $5-6 billion, right? And this is what you're nickel and diamond people for. And then the Chargers, the daycare, right? Game day daycare for kids with the Chargers. I think it was just interesting. They gave a discount, like $75 for your first kid, every kid after that $50.
Yeah,
so
Shireen,
you're like, wow.
I'm stealing this from Shireen Williams, but she tweeted out, Phillip Rivers obviously broke the Chargers. Yeah,
God, that's a great line. I mean, that's amazing.
Credit to Shireen. But yeah, I laugh at that. I'm like, wow. Hey, guess what, guys? Don't worry. You get a little discount on that one. I like that's wild to me. Look, you just sold one playoff game for $150 million. Split out amongst everybody. Maybe we just give free childcare on Sundays. It just seems like that would make sense.
The Chargers are paying their lease is $1 a year. Like you got $1 a year lease at SoFi. So basically, that first child is 75 years worth of your rent at SoFi Stadium for the Chargers. I mean, come on, that's just it's interesting though what you and that plays into the treatment of families aspect. Is there daycare? Are there family rooms? Like come game day, is there going to be a private area for families to congregate? I think it's an avenue of the game that is becoming more important to the players, particularly the inclusion of their families. Whereas we're getting away from the era of coaches being like, I got a bed in my office and I never leave. And, players, we want our players here sun up to sundown. And you tell your family you're going to be gone during the season. That's just how it's going to be. It's not that NFL anymore.
Well, I think it's pretty staggering as I look back at the ranks. I want to pull up and make sure I got them right. For all of the conversation, the Chiefs are at 31st. The Patriots, historically a well-regarded organizations, at 29. The Steelers at 28, right? Like, I do think it's pretty stunning that some of the bigger brands that we're used to in the NFL are scoring so low. And, as much as we have laughed over the course of the last year and commented on these shows that Mahomes and Andy Reid have saved the Chiefs so many times on the field, it feels kind of like they're saving them off the field too. Like, you don't have to worry about some things when you're just always great, right? Like, you don't have to worry. The Chiefs are such a better franchise when it comes to winning on the football field than most. Maybe they just don't have to worry about this stuff right now. But there is an element of, hey, you have a choice when you're doing all of this stuff. Are you going to invest in a way that makes people want to continually come and be part of your organization? I for one, looked at this even last year when it came out as a Raiders fan, and I've never hidden that. Like, I looked at it with a ton of pride because we all know that Oakland's facilities were awful. So the fact that the Raiders facilities were so well regarded to me was like, oh, it's just nice to finally not feel embarrassed by it. I think there's some franchises that really win here. And there's some franchises that have been around for a very long time that are going to have to look in the mirror and make sure that they're not just relying on their brand, but they're also providing the same level of experience that everybody else gets in the league.
Yeah. And I absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I also think as much as teams preach football culture, right? Why would you not want to listen to your players when they talk about workplace culture, right? Isn't culture, don't you think those two are possibly tied together? Isn't it a lot easier to buy into a football culture when you feel like the workplace culture is really good? From a data standpoint, there's not enough data to know if this is really actually impacting, like attracting free agents, right? Like we don't know that. Let's wait and see. I mean, 10 years from now, maybe they'll have a finer point or an ability to break that down where they can see that maybe there were some close calls where players are sitting there going, hey, it was 50-50. The money was pretty much the same, and I didn't really know either place. But when I looked at this and I looked at how players felt about one place versus how they felt about another, it did swing me. I'm not going to say it's necessarily going to happen. Most people assume it won't because really it's all about money. But I can tell you, working at Yahoo, I remember there was a time when Google and Yahoo and Facebook were fighting over engineers. And I remember there was a time where these engineers were making a lot of money. And all of a sudden what started to come into play was, what's the day in the life of an engineer like at Google? What's it like at Facebook? What's it like at Yahoo? And it started to change where the flow of these individuals were starting to end up. So it's not a perfect one-for-one with NFL, but still.
I also think it speaks, though, to the conversations we've never been able to hear before, because you know so well that these athletes have become tight-knit friends, right? So whatever they're saying in these surveys about certain locations, they're saying to each other, too. And while you're right, I don't think that it necessarily sways a free agent one way or the other. The tone that certain organizations are talked about, that does become a real thing, even if it's a subconscious bias. That becomes a real part of what a player thinks about when it's like, oh, man, you should come play with me in Miami. Well, look at the way Miami graded out. Pretty easy for that sales pitch. Like, I think there is some element of that plays into part of it, too. It echoes a tone of conversation we haven't heard in the past.
And Fitz, it's so instantaneous and so real time now. Like I wrote a column today and I made the point, like, do you know how this used to get exposed? Players would to reporters over a long enough period of time that we would get it hardwired in our brain over like a decade that, oh man, the Bengals are cheap. The Chargers are cheap. It wasn't 1 year to the next, though. It would take time. Because, you had to hear it enough times, or players would switch teams in free agency and go, oh my God, the facilities are so much better here. These facilities suck where I came from, and so that idea of what the good franchises versus the bad franchises were to be a player inside, it would take time for that to develop. Not anymore. Like now the players that straight up are telling you, they're like, hey, 77% of us, and it's a large number per team that are straight up just gripping it and ripping it in these surveys, and it feels pretty real. And when you ask for tangible reasons, like the Chiefs, why did they hammer Clark Hunt? There was a tangible reason why. Like, they just straight up said, like, hey, there was this promises made. They felt like the promises weren't followed through on, and that's how he ended up with such a low grade. That now is in the pipeline every single year, and it's not going to take years for enough reporters to hear, well, the Chiefs have been promising locker room for years and years and years. And then eventually some reporter pops off about it. No, now it's just like, it's out there. All your business is on Front Street.
I should remind everybody, Josh McDaniels was still the coach when the Raiders grade was done. So yes. as Vic Tafur from The Athletic pointed out today, had they even gotten an average grade on coach, they would have been number 4 on this survey. Instead, number 9. Still, I'm just reminding everybody, the player's opinion was not on Antonio Pierce. Just making sure that gets pointed out. Always defending my beloved Raiders. All right. He's got work to do. He's actually going to be working all week. Make sure that you're following us, by the way, on the Yahoo Sports app, and following C-Rob on social media at Charles Robinson, simply because there's so much news that breaks, and we'll have you covered all week long. I'll be back Monday with Zero Blitz. Of course, you can follow me at Jason Fitz, and follow Stone at SJ Rochelle, our producer, doing God's work behind the glass. As always, C-Rob, tell the world how they can continue to support Terez Paylor's legacy.
Absolutely. Please check out breakingtea.com/Terez and purchase your All Juice tee or hoodies. We're going to be having the 2024, this next offseason All Juice team coming in the next few weeks, actually. And remember, the proceeds from that purchase go to support the Terez Paylor Scholarship at Howard University. You can also you can donate to that directly, as well as the scholarship in his name at Mizzou, if you check out our podcast description.
While you're checking out that podcast description, also leave us a review, 5-star. If you don't want to leave us a 5-star, then go to hell. Don't review us at all. But if you're there, leave us that 5-star review, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, and enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us every single week. We'll be back next Thursday with more Inside Coverage. Thanks for hanging out with us. I love that I just told the whole audience to go to hell.